What if one CEO earned $280 million not for inventing something, but for controlling systems you never even notice? And what if another executive makes the equivalent of more than 1,000 years of an employee's labor in a single year? Behind the world's biggest corporations lies a hidden economy of invisible power, a billion-dollar crisis, and executives paid unimaginable fortunes to control what most people have never seen. Stay until the end, or you'll miss the one CEO whose pay exposed what corporations truly value most. Sundar Pichai, the incomprehensible number. When Sundar Pichai earned $280.6 million in a single year, the figure stopped being money. A confession about how the alphabet values the person who controls its nervous system. No other CEO on any list came close. The second highest package measured roughly $66.9 million. Pichai earned 4 times that amount. He joined Google in 2004 as an engineer building a browser. Chrome became dominant globally, 3.5 billion active users. Infrastructure. Not a product you choose, but the operating system through which humanity encounters the internet. Gmail, Google Maps, Android, 4 platforms that reshaped human communication. By the time he became Alphabet CEO in 2019, the company controlled pathways through which $2 trillion in annual advertising flowed. Alphabet's median employee salary reached $258,708, highest among Fortune 500 technology companies. The company hired electrical engineers from MIT, mathematicians from Stanford, physicists trained at CERN. And yet Pichai's compensation exceeded the median employee salary by 1,084 times. What separated this case from raw numbers? Pichai maintained a 96% employee approval rating. He emphasized empathy, calm decision-making under pressure, known internally for listening more than speaking. The compensation attached to that restraint to power that did not require visibility or personal branding revealed something unsettling about modern corporations. They do not reward the loudest voices. They reward the people who control the systems that make loudness irrelevant. Pichai's influence exists inside decision-making about algorithmic ranking, advertising allocation, data infrastructure, systems invisible to the general public, but worth hundreds of billions of dollars. His compensation was payment for controlling that invisibility, not for innovation or visionary thinking, but for managing the apparatus that shapes how billions of people interact with information globally. Shantanu Narayan, the system architect's invisibility. Shantanu Narayan earned $39.1 million while running a company generating $11.2 billion in annual revenue. On paper, highest paid executive. In practice, almost nobody knew his name. When he became Adobe CEO in 2007, the company operated on a traditional model: sell software licenses. Customers purchased Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign. Revenue was unpredictable, vulnerable to piracy. Narayan restructured the entire company into subscription services, monthly payments, continuous updates, automatic billing. The shift required confronting millions of customers who preferred ownership to rental. It required building cloud infrastructure when competitors debated cloud strategy. Patience measured in years, not quarters. The economics transformed. Recurring revenue, increased customer lifetime value. Earnings became predictable. Investors valuing consistency. Pension funds managing trillions of dollars accumulated Adobe stock. Market capitalization tripled. Adobe entered the Fortune 400. Narayan earned $39.1 million for redesigning how money moved through the company, not inventing a product, for understanding that corporate power lives inside payment systems. His pay stood at 266 times the median employee salary of $147,115 a ratio, reflecting what system-level leadership commanded. He avoided personal branding. No memoir, no TED Talks, no Twitter account. His influence existed entirely inside pricing models, contract structures, quarterly earnings guidance. When asked about his approach, he spoke about discipline, patience, the long game. His compensation was stock awards vesting over years, tying his personal financial outcome directly to Adobe's long-term trajectory. He could not cash out without signaling doubt about the company's future. Compare that to a CEO earning $50 million in cash bonuses. Narayan was not being paid to extract value. He was being paid to build systems that would generate value for decades. Comment below. Does system-level architecture deserve higher compensation than product innovation? Satya Nadella, the internal alchemist. Satya Nadella spent 27 years inside Microsoft before becoming CEO. When he took control in 2014, the company was the world's largest software corporation by market capitalization, yet trapped. The mobile revolution passed Microsoft by. Apple, iPhone, and Google Android controlled smartphones. Windows Mobile had single-digit market share. Nadella did not attempt a consumer phone. He understood the fundamental shift. Cloud was not a new product category. It was the foundational transformation that would reshape computing for 20 years. Companies would stop buying servers. They would rent computing power from Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud. Companies controlling cloud infrastructure would control enterprise computing. Under Nadella, Microsoft's cloud revenue expanded from $16.5 billion to $20.3 billion in 2 years. The trajectory signaled strategic clarity to investors. The company was not chasing consumer trends. It was restructuring around enterprise computing's future. He approved the LinkedIn acquisition for $26.2 billion. The price seemed excessive. Why pay that much for a networking site? Microsoft was not buying a social network. It was buying professional data of 900 million users. LinkedIn users maintain detailed career records. Combined with Microsoft Azure and Office 365, this allowed offering unprecedented workforce insights. A company could use Azure Analytics to understand skill gaps, LinkedIn data to identify hiring patterns, Office 365 to monitor productivity. He authorized the GitHub acquisition for $7.5 billion. GitHub represented the global developer community, millions of programmers. By acquiring it, Microsoft embedded itself into the development workflow. Developers writing code were writing inside a Microsoft platform. Deploying code meant deploying to Microsoft Azure. Nadella earned $42.9 million for authorizing acquisitions, totaling over $35 billion. He did not invent products. He constructed ecosystems. The compensation reflected understanding that in modern technology, competitive advantage flows from architecture. Microsoft's median employee salary reached $172,512. Nadella's compensation stood at 249 times the median. The ratio rewarded transformation without existential crisis premium. Comment below. Does ecosystem control deserve higher compensation than innovation? Lisa Su, the engineer who rebuilt Silicon. Lisa Su held a PhD in electrical engineering from MIT. She did not come to technology through business school or consulting. She came through physics, understanding how electrons move through silicon. AMD was dying when she arrived. The company had become dependent on the personal computer market, a market that was shrinking. AMD's processors, optimized for PCs and servers, had no clear path to relevance. Su did not chase consumer markets. She identified a structural shift. Artificial intelligence would require massive computational power. Training modern language models required specialized processors optimized for matrix multiplication. Gaming platforms required custom silicon for graphics processing. Data centers required processors designed for cloud computing workloads. She redirected AMD entirely. By 2015, non-PC revenue had increased from 10% to 40% of the company's revenue. This was not marketing. It required hiring thousands of engineers, building new manufacturing partnerships, designing entirely new processor architectures, coordinating with partners like Sony and Google, committing billions to launches years away. AMD operates with the highest technical intensity among semiconductor companies. The median employee salary stood at $96,874, yet Su earned $58.5 million, 602 times the median. The extreme ratio reflected the reality of industrial manufacturing. Success is not measured in innovation cycles. It is measured in perfect execution repeated billions of times. Howmet manufactured hundreds of millions of components annually. A 0.1% defect rate meant thousands of defective parts shipped to aircraft manufacturers. A 0.01% defect rate was the target. Su's compensation reflected the weight of that responsibility. Her decisions about manufacturing processes, quality control protocols, supplier relationships, capital investments in advanced equipment, all invisible to the general public, determined whether AMD could supply the global computing industry with processors required for every data center built. The invisibility of technical power is perhaps the most important lesson about executive compensation. The highest-paid executives in mature industries are often those who control systems so critical that failure is not an option. Miguel Patricio, the price of radical inequality. Miguel Patricio stepped into Kraft Heinz during near-total organizational decay. The company was losing market share. Heinz ketchup and Kraft cheese brands that defined American eating were seen as old, commodified. The company's cost structure was bloated. Investors demanded restructuring. Patricio earned $43.3 million in 2019. The median Kraft Heinz employee earned $42,689 annually. This created a CEO-to-worker pay ratio of 1,014 times. Over 1,000 times. If a median employee worked for an entire year, Patricio's compensation represented 1,014 years of their labor. The disparity was not accidental. It reflected something deliberate about how corporations price leadership during crises. Patricio came from Coca-Cola, where he spent years managing global supply chains worth tens of billions of dollars. Coca-Cola operates in 200 countries with operations in vastly different regulatory environments. Managing that complexity requires understanding not just business fundamentals, but cultural nuance, geopolitical risk. He then moved to Johnson & Johnson, another global conglomerate managing dozens of independent business units. Then Anheuser-Busch, managing brands that face constant pressure from premium competitors and store-brand alternatives. Kraft Heinz needed exactly that skill set. The company owned brands that had become commodities. Kraft cheese competed against store brands. Heinz ketchup competed against lesser-known brands that cost 30% less. The margin pressure was relentless. The only way to restore profitability was not innovation. It was ruthless cost discipline and operational efficiency. Patricio's compensation was the market's way of saying, "We are paying for you to destroy inefficiency, eliminate redundancy, and make difficult decisions about which facilities to close." The pay was not aspirational. It was a reflection of how expensive it is to ask a single executive to restructure an organization that had grown bloated across generations. His leadership style remained deliberately low profile. He gave a few interviews. He did not cultivate a personal brand. The restructuring happened through quarterly earnings calls discussing margin improvement and cost reduction. No charisma, no vision, just operational precision. The 1,014 times pay ratio exposed something uncomfortable. The highest-paid executives in traditional industries often lead during moments of organizational contraction. They are paid to make people redundant. David Zaslav, the content infrastructure play. David Zaslav spent 20 years at NBC Universal, learning how cable networks actually monetize audiences. Not through Nielsen ratings or viewership numbers, which every executive understands. Through distribution fees. Through licensing arrangements, through long-term contracts with cable providers, satellite operators, streaming platforms committing billions of dollars to carrying content across decades. When he became Discovery CEO in 2007, the company owned networks like TLC, Animal Planet, Discovery Channel. These were factual programming networks, documentaries about everything from gold mining in Alaska to the interior design industry. Programming was inexpensive to produce relative to scripted drama. A premium scripted series costs $5 to $10 million per episode. A Discovery documentary cost $500,000 to $1 million. Yet the content retained value indefinitely. A season of Game of Thrones aired and became relatively obsolete. Viewers moved on. A season of Planet Earth aired and got licensed to streaming services in Southeast Asia and remained valuable. International broadcasters license Planet Earth for decades because audiences never tire of nature documentaries. The content does not expire. Zaslav structured Discovery around that insight. He secured a 12-year PGA Tour broadcasting agreement, roughly 2,000 hours of live golf every year. Golf produces recurring revenue monetized through multiple distribution channels, cable television, streaming platforms, international licensing, infrastructure, not blockbuster. Discovery earned $45.8 million for building a company that operated like a content utility, not selling entertainment, but selling predictable, recurring content revenue to broadcasters desperate for something to fill airtime. The compensation reflected something fundamental. In modern media, the highest-paid executives understand that entertainment is not about creativity. It is about infrastructure, about controlling the content that fills schedules globally. Comment below. Does infrastructure control deserve higher compensation than creative innovation? Joe C. Plant, The Invisible Industrial Empire. There are CEOs with household names, and there are CEOs with genuine power. John C. Plant embodied the distinction. Unknown to the general public, a search for his name yielded almost no results in major media. Yet his compensation, $51.7 million, placed him among the highest-paid executives globally. Plant ran Howmet Aerospace, a company that manufactures advanced components for jet engines and aircraft structures. Not engines themselves, components. The blades that rotate inside jet engines, the fasteners that hold aircraft frames together, materials that must withstand temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit without degrading. His career was shaped by industrial manufacturing. As chairman of TRW Automotive, he oversaw 65,000 employees across 190 manufacturing facilities worldwide. Managing a global industrial company means managing something almost entirely invisible to the public. Supply chains, just-in-time manufacturing, quality control systems, customer relationships, purchasing components in volumes of millions of units. When Plant transitioned to Howmet Aerospace, the stakes escalated. Aircraft manufacturers depend on suppliers like Howmet for components that, if they fail, result in aircraft crashes. Howmet has zero tolerance for defects. Every part must meet specifications within microns. Every alloy composition must be precisely controlled. Howmet's median employee salary was $55,497. Plant earned 930 times that amount. The extreme ratio reflected industrial manufacturing reality. Success is not measured in innovation cycles or market disruption. It is measured in perfect execution repeated billions of times. Howmet manufactured hundreds of millions of components annually. A 0.1% defect rate meant thousands of defective parts. A 0.01% defect rate was the target. Plant's compensation reflected the weight of that responsibility. His decisions about manufacturing processes, quality control protocols, supplier relationships, capital investments in advanced equipment, all invisible to the general public, determined whether Howmet could supply the global aerospace industry with components required for every commercial aircraft built. The invisibility of industrial power is perhaps the most important lesson about executive compensation. The highest-paid executives in mature industries often control systems so critical and so invisible that failure is not an option. Lachlan Murdoch, the heir who survived failure. Lachlan Murdoch was born with media empire access. His father, Rupert Murdoch, built News Corporation into one of the world's largest media conglomerates. Lachlan could have stepped directly into the top executive role. Instead, he spent decades learning the business from the ground up. He began in Australia, managing regional media divisions for News Corporation. He moved to the United States, taking senior positions at 21st Century Fox, where he oversaw operations across television networks, film studios, and sports broadcasting. His early career focused on understanding how media companies monetize content, through advertising, through licensing, through affiliate relationships with cable providers. But in 2008, Lachlan made a catastrophic investment decision. He became involved with the One Tower project, a commercial real estate development in Sydney. The investment went disastrously wrong. Lachlan lost an estimated $40 million personally and withdrew from public-facing leadership roles for several years. In most corporate environments, a $40 million loss would end an executive career, particularly under public scrutiny. Instead, Lachlan did something more valuable. He demonstrated the ability to recover from it. He learned to accept setbacks without defending himself through public relations management. He simply stepped away, waited, and allowed time to reposition him. When Disney acquired major portions of 21st Century Fox in 2019, the media landscape fractured. Out of restructuring emerged Fox Corporation, a smaller but more focused company centered on news, sports, live broadcasting. Lachlan returned as CEO and received $42.1 million in compensation. The compensation reflected something investors valued: the ability to survive failure and return stronger. Lachlan earned 125 times the median Fox employee salary, a far lower ratio than crisis-driven CEO pay. The ratio reflected the reality that inherited access, when combined with demonstrated resilience, commanded premium compensation. His leadership at Fox Corporation avoided the flashiness of inherited privilege. He remained deliberately low profile. The work involved negotiating long-term broadcasting agreements, managing talent, and maintaining editorial standards. The kind of work that does not generate headlines but determines whether a media company survives the next decade. Lachlan's case illustrated something important. inherited advantage, when actually earned through demonstrated competence and resilience, can command higher compensation than many purely self-made backgrounds. Bill McDermott, the deli owner who built empires. At 16 years old, Bill McDermott purchased a neighborhood deli for $7,000. The purchase was not a side project. It was his path to education. He worked the deli, managed inventory, negotiated with suppliers, and understood customer preferences. Every lesson came from practical necessity. The deli taught him something that business schools struggle to convey: cash flow discipline. When you own a deli, you understand immediately that revenue and profit are not the same thing. Sell a sandwich for $12, ingredients cost $6, wages cost $3, rent costs $2, you make $1 per sandwich. Sell 1,000 sandwiches monthly and you make $1,000. That margin is the difference between survival and failure. McDermott internalized that reality at an age when most people debated whether college was worth attending. After college and an MBA from Northwestern, McDermott entered enterprise software sales at Xerox. 17 years, learning how large organizations buy technology, negotiate contracts, commit to multi-year service agreements. Xerox was a company selling through complex channel relationships and deep enterprise integration. He moved to Siebel Systems during the customer relationship management boom. Then SAP, the world's largest enterprise software company. He became the first American CEO in SAP's history. During his tenure, market capitalization increased from $39 billion to $159 billion. McDermott's rise was not driven by innovation. It was driven by understanding enterprise buying dynamics. He expanded SAP into cloud computing, acquired companies extending the product ecosystem, deepened global enterprise relationships, operational and unglamorous, precisely the skill set required to grow a $100 billion software company. When McDermott became ServiceNow CEO in 2019, he earned $41.7 million. ServiceNow is enterprise workflow software used by large organizations to automate internal processes. The median ServiceNow employee salary was $223,000, among the highest in technology. McDermott earned 187 times the median salary. The compensation reflected consistency. From a $7,000 deli to SAP's $39 billion to $159 billion transformation to ServiceNow leadership. His story was not rags to riches in the traditional sense. It was someone who learned business fundamentals early, applied them relentlessly, and scaled across increasingly large organizations. He remained deliberate about his public presence. He gave interviews but did not cultivate celebrity. He focused on operational execution rather than personal branding. When asked about leadership, he emphasized discipline, focus, the unglamorous work of building competitive advantage through better execution rather than innovation. Comment below. What deserves higher compensation, building something from zero, or scaling something from billions to tens of billions? This list shows that CEO salaries are largely unrelated to the level of public success they demonstrate. From this, the following 3 lessons emerge. Lesson 1. Salary follows power, not reputation. The highest paid executives manage systems the public can't see: cloud infrastructure, production processes, content licensing agreements, financial restructuring. Reputation and salary go in opposite directions. The more famous an executive is, the lower their actual salary tends to be. Lesson 2. The price of saving a sinking ship. Crises demand the highest price. Patricio inherited a company where iconic brands had become commodities and organizational debt had accumulated across generations. His CEO-to-employee ratio reached 1,014 times, not because the board was generous, but because restructuring a collapsing institution requires a person willing to make decisions that destroy livelihoods in order to save the company itself. The market does not pay that premium for growth, it pays for survival. Lesson 3. Compensation reveals corporate priorities. The CEO-to-employee ratio ranges from 125 to 1,014 times. These gaps reveal what corporations actually reward versus what they claim to value. Companies in crisis or restructuring pay CEOs higher salaries. Companies in growth phases distribute compensation more evenly. If this video changed how you understand corporate power, please like and subscribe to the Wealth Dominion channel, where we decode the financial systems shaping the world while they operate invisibly. Thank you for watching.